everyone. So we'll call the regular meeting of City Council for Monday, March 12th to order. Our first item of business, and we'll move to the second. I'm going to go to 2.2, Councillor Rogers, while Councillor Parslow gets set up. So, Councillor Rogers, Youth Advisory Council.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, let's just move things along. I'll just move that the following draft of terms of reference for the Youth Advisory Committee be received for discussion.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Seconded. And we'll move this forward for Mayor's business.
Through your worship,
actually,
no.
Oh, we could do it now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's on the agenda. Perfect.
And we can vote on the motion to receive it for discussion, and then if a new motion is necessary, it can be done at that time.
All right.
there's a motion at the end of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll have a motion to receive for information. All in favor?
For discussion.
Or for discussion, sorry. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the principals at Pettigrew Christian and Central School campus, I had emailed them asking them for a response to be able to have a discussion with the students in the school, and I CC'd Mayor and Council that. We didn't get an answer back, and I understand that they're very busy because we kind of caught them between report cards and stuff like that, I was told. But I've had a conversation just this past week with the Josh Curiata, Paul Chisholm, Brad Booker, and Eric Wolf. Eric Wolf is the civics class at the high school, and we talked about how to move this forward. Seeing, like, I've given them copies of the terms of reference. Now, the terms of reference I just came up with, I got that information from other youth advisory committees, councils, notably the British Columbia Youth Parliament, the Federal Youth Advisory Committee to the to government there. So there's a combination of a lot of them out there, and I just put them in here, and knowing full well that the terms of reference, this draft, it's just a guide for the committee once we get it picked, or council. I really think it should be a council. But anyways, you guys have all read them all. I've emailed them out to you as well. I don't know of anything that you guys might have, but if you have any questions, just ask me and hopefully I can answer them. I did leave at the end of it the responsibilities of the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, the members, the code of conduct, and all of that stuff. That'll be up to the council. But if you went through on page 3, it would be it was the attachment that was with it, and basically it outlined 10 easy steps. So in chapter 1, it was identify the champions. We've kind of worked through that. That's talked about in the terms of reference a bit. Recruiting participants, we've done that. We've gone to the school and we've met with them in an assembly. Determine the why. I really like that, for all the reasons why. And establish roles and responsibilities. That's kind of in the terms of reference. But when it gets into setting goals and outlining activities and securing funding and ensure sustainability and all that, that to me is up to the committee to work through. I think that it's going to be, when it gets up and going, I think it's going to be a great tool that mayor and council can actually use to engage the youth in the community on other important issues that we make. Anybody have anything else?
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Rogers? Councillor McFadden.
Well, I just think it's a very worthwhile project. I think it's important that we do that, and I commend your taking the lead in getting this organized. And I hope it works out. It's a worthwhile project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? I agree. Great job. Great initiative in terms of putting this together, and I really appreciate the work you put into it and bringing it forward to council. So.
Okay. So if it's okay if I go ahead with the motion?
Yep.
you guys might want to adjust or change this a little bit, I'm not sure. So I'd move that approval in principle to the first draft terms of reference for the Youth Advisory Council, and further that Councillor Rogers be authorized to present this draft to the students for their information.
Okay, seconded. Councillor Wilbur? Second. Discussion.
What I do know is they're having an assembly in April. I have talked to the principals and the folks that I'd mentioned earlier at the school, and we had talked about how to move it forward, and there's an indication that they could work with the civics class and through the assembly at the school, and they could just have a ballot thing where students could put their own name forward, or they could put somebody else's name forward that goes to the civic class. They look at all of the names, and then they would contact those individuals and just see what they want to do. It's up to the kids at the
Yeah,
end of the
let
day.
the kids decide, right, how it works for them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Rogers. Anything further for you? Do you have any other councillor business?
No, I've been focusing on this.
Sure. 2.1, Councillor Parslow, City Operating Agreement with Spectra of Venue Management.
Yeah, before, I'd just like to
Sure.
draw attention to this. I guess I was the only one of us who could attend this second flood mitigation planning
I can't hear him very well. Can you
Can we
talk
get
into
the-
mic?
Oh.
So this is about flood mitigation. I was the only one of us there. And Kevin, you may want to interject here, but here's an interesting map you should look at. The map shows the direct and the indirect impacts of flooding, the 2016 flood. And one of the exercises we engaged in was to validate the information that led to this map being produced. The map is, I'm going to say, draft. I think one of the thoughts was that when it's finalized, perhaps it should be made readily available to realtors, be on the city website. So the direct impacts are kind of obvious. You know, there's flood water at your doorstep, in your house, etc. Indirect, power outages, anxiety, stress, lots of inability to maybe leave your place because of washouts. And so this would be interesting information for, I'm sure, anybody wanting to buy a house, or people needing to think about how they're going to, if they are going to buy a house, how they're going to be prepared for future flood events. And one of the things that came out loud and clear to me, resonated to me, is that these flood events are going to occur. We don't know when they're going to occur. It's going to take a lot of effort to have anything effective to mitigate them. But homeowners many homeowners were affected because of power outages and their sump pumps not working. And one of the things that was stressed is that each homeowner has a responsibility to a certain degree to prepare themselves for dealing with future events, such as having auxiliary power available in their homes. Did you want to add anything, Kevin, to that gathering? So anyway, have a look at that map. That's for you, Kevin. They had one left and gave it to me for you. So
Thank you.
Back to the non-surprise item. Understanding the city contract with Spectra Venue Management. Sort of the last budget meeting. A number of questions were raised in my mind. I have had a couple of discussions with our CAO. And when I first came on council, I must admit it took me some time to get a handle on how the contract the city had with Global Spectra operated. And so I know the answers to these questions, but I felt that rather than having go through the process of getting council permission for staff to write a report, and I didn't want to burden our CAO with another report. The key questions which might spawn some further discussion for me have been presented in the agenda. And the intention here is to have better understanding on the current contract with Global Spectrum and how it operates. So, you ready, Duncan?
Yep.
So the first question is, how is the level of operating subsidy calculated?
So through your worship, the operating budget, there's a significant amount of language within the contract regarding the operating budget. There is a benchmark of $1,550,000 included in the contract or agreement, and that's more based around incentives. We're provided a rolling forecast. We're provided monthly financial statements, and we work with our contract holder, our Spectra, on that budget. And essentially the agreement says that we'll work through annually, and we'll take a look at those costs and what that's running at and what that looks like. And if there's any disagreement, then it'll just increase 3% above whatever the budget was the previous year. We have held that budget static since 2013, is when it changed to $1,550,000, and it's been flat since then. It hasn't changed, and yeah, I think that's pretty much the operating subsidy and how that's calculated.
Okay.
I'll roll on into the other questions because they all blend, if that's okay.
May I just make a comment first? That this amount is in the contract.
So through your worship, there's a benchmark of $1,550,000. It is in the contract.
Right.
However, there is language in there that says if there's changes or throughout the year, if those monthly financial statements are showing that there's some significant change, there is some flexibility to work with the contractor. However, if we can't reach an agreement, it goes up 3% from the previous year.
So I think I need to ask some supplementary questions. Before this latest revision to the contract, was that amount in a contract? In the previous contract?
Sorry, through your worship, I'm unsure. I'm not
The
certain.
reason I'm asking that question, and why I thought the council should be aware that that amount is in this new contract. Well, that new contract was negotiated 2015 or 14?
No, sorry, through your worship, we're 1 year into the new contract.
1 year into the contract. The impression I had from other discussions with other staff prior to you being in your role was that the chief financial officer reviewed the budget proposed for the Encounter Event Centre, and if she felt it was reasonable, agreed on behalf of the city, which is reflected in the budget. I mean, it's something she didn't do arbitrarily. It was done at the council level.
Mm-hmm.
What the revelation for me was that this amount is a contractual amount rather than something that was negotiated each year.
So through your worship, the benchmark is included in the contract because there are a number of incentives included in the contract for the operator. They have to do with incentivizing them to remain under the budget and create some surplus. Also, local hire, local purchasing, and community goods. There's a number of different pieces in there, and they needed a number to ensure that the contract didn't get decreased every year and those incentives were lost. So I think that's why the benchmark was put in, from my understanding, and that's why there's some language to say if something changed within the community that really changed the way that contract was delivered, you still need some flexibility to work with the contractor and change that number. However, status quo, it continues to stay static as it has. And that'll lead into the next surplus question if I
Maybe
can.
you should read the question for people who don't know
Sure.
what the question
So
is.
the question was, if the Encana Event Center operations result in a surplus, how do the excess funds become available to the city? So the city of Dawson Creek holds the bank accounts for the Encana Event Center. They're not separate bank account. It is a city of Dawson Creek bank account that the operator has signing authority on and has the ability to work within, but it is a city account. Unlike, for instance, like a tourism or the previous tourism contract where they held their own bank accounts. So at the end of the year, this is really no different than a pool or a public works. Any money that is remaining or under budget transfers back over into our surplus, end of year surplus, that rolls into that bigger number that starts off the next year. Some of it goes into unallocated, and we kind of work our way through it. So any money, any surplus at the Encana Event Center comes back to the city at the end of the year. Now, I should note that that surplus isn't just on the 1.5. That budget is a much larger budget, and that money comes back. So looking through the history a little bit, since 2013, the budget has been static. And between those 4 years, we don't have 2017 yet, but through those 4 years, it's been as low as about a $30,000 surplus, and it's been as high as a $130,000 surplus, and ranging in between. So it ranges every year. We understand there's a lot of volatility in that market and what they're doing. And also, I guess the other note is there is an incentive in the agreement that if Spectra, the operations result in a surplus, Spectra receives 20% of that surplus as an incentive.
Okay.
Good. Next.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question is, given that staff seeks approval through the budget process for capital expenditure, why is this process not followed in all instances for the Encana Event Center? So, written within the agreement, it actually states that any capital expenditure less than $30,000, less than $30,000 threshold, will be completed within the operational budget. Spectra is required to report back on those capital projects so that we can record them appropriately within our financial statements and according to the generally accepted accounting principles. So there's a $30,000 threshold. That threshold was decreased during the last negotiations, and that was a negotiation point from Spectra, not the city, because they were concerned, because that capital is being completed out of the operational budget, that's decreasing the amount of surplus at the end of the year, and that's decreasing the incentive they get. So any capital project up to $30,000 that gets done decreases the surplus, and that 20% therefore decreases as well. So it's actually written in the agreement that after the second operating year, and each year after, that we'll review the $30,000 threshold and ensure that it's not having a negative impact on the manager's ability to achieve incentives. So they were concerned about that. Anything over $30,000, council sees within the within the budget, and makes the approvals, such as dressing rooms and this year some HVAC and other work.
Can I just say?
Yep.
Thanks for these answers, Duncan. They're great, very clear. There was the capital expenditure that we learned of, I think, in the last budget meeting that triggered a bell in my head. So it could be, given your answer, this could be phased out through the review process that you've outlined.
So through your worship, all of the language within the agreement says we would negotiate and we would both agree on whatever changes we're going to make.
Yeah. My personal viewpoint on this is that, and essentially, you know, if I own a property, the tenant needs to seek approval for what, let's call it, tenant improvements that are made, and that's, I guess, the gist of my concern. So anyway, thank you. That's all I.
Yep.
Next question.
Yeah, so through your worship, and just my understanding of where this language comes from and why it was included, and it was also, I think, it was around 50 or even higher. I'm not certain what the number was in the previous contract, but my understanding is when the building opened, we were still defining what it was going to look like, and we were still defining what the shows would look like and what the activities and events would look like, and they wanted to allow some flexibility for the operator within that operational budget to complete some work that might be venue specific or might cater to the type of events that they're having that weren't thought of or were maybe removed from the project previously. And so it was to create some of that opportunity throughout the year, and also to maybe remove some of those asks coming later, the next year, the following year, for some of these smaller capital projects keep coming in, give them that flexibility to curtail to their events without coming back for that capital budget year after year. So that was my understanding.
Councillor Javetkov?
Just a question on the 30,000. I assume that's cumulative. It's not 30,000 on individual projects?
Yes, sir. So through your worship, my understanding is it's a total of 30,000 per year, all in.
But the point is that it's to their detriment. If they put in capital, that reduces the amount of the incentive that they receive based on that surplus, because that eats into the overall surplus for the year. So if they put 30 in, that costs them 6,000 in incentive.
Yeah.
Good. Go ahead.
Is it okay, Mr. Parsons?
This was intended so they were all on the same page, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so my understanding is we've got a 60 million plus building, and we have written into the contract a certain amount of money that the operator is allowed to spend on capital improvements to the facility. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you. Anything further on that question?
No,
Good.
ready for the last question?
Okay.
So the final question is, what steps need to be taken to ensure the council approves all expenditures of a capital nature at the Encana Event Center in conjunction with all other planned capital expenditures? It's written into the agreement that after the second year, we'll look at that $30,000 threshold. If council decides that we don't want to continue down this road after that second year, we can try to remove that process and have everything come to council if that's the direction council would like to go.
So, and perhaps that's an item for diary that we could put on and say, look, that, or to put it on that we want to have a review of that if that's the will of council to look at in next year's cycle.
If that's where council would like to go, yeah.
Just
Yep.
the reason behind that question was written without the specific information you've provided here, is that, we get lists of requests for capital expenditure, and I think we assess what's the priority, and if there's some money's been spent on capital elsewhere that we're not aware of, it seems we might feel there's a more pressing need for the funds. So that's the reason behind my question. That's all I'm stating there, yeah.
Duncan and then Councillor Rogers.
Sorry, so through your worship, if council chose not, for instance, to do the curtains this year, which the curtains are budgeted at 50, but the inspector would only be able to do 30,000, that money wouldn't come back to the city under the existing model. That would remain in the operating budget, and there may be a surplus at the end of the year. Inspector receive 20% of whatever that surplus is.
Councillor Rogers.
I was going to go there and talk about the cameras as well. So if, I know that it was, say, budgeted $50,000 for the curtains, but if we got funding that would offset, like if we got $30,000 in funding, would and utilize that $30,000 that they have, I know the amount would be more, but could we, I'm thinking that we can actually fund the camera and the curtains in partnership with NDIT, and it won't be more than $30,000.
Yeah.
So that, can we actually ask Spectra if that would be an intent, and then we could possibly take that money that we had budgeted for it out?
Duncan.
Yeah, so through your worship, we work pretty closely with Spectra, and if there's grants available, definitely. Now, I would like to note that not every year capital gets completed. They don't have that ability every year, and so I would hate to say $30,000 is being spent every year on capital. It's really as needed and where it fits within that budget and when they have an idea of what their surplus looks like. So I wouldn't want to tie the operator down to $30,000 every year, but this year in particular, they have talked about the $30,000 for the curtains and essentially committed that funding, so it is available this year.
Thank you. Anything further? Good, thank you. That's great information. Appreciate it. Anything further, Councillor Parslow, under Councillor Business for you?
No, I very much appreciate
Thank you.
Duncan's answers. Thank you.
Councillor, any other Councillor Business? Councillor Wilbur.
I'll be quick. Councillor Sherman and I attended the What's Climate Got to Do with It in Fort St. John, and for us, some of it was new, some of it we already knew, but the next day there was an event also being held and hosted by Fraser Basin Council that I believe our energy manager attended. So just as staff, if we could get that follow-up information, I'd really appreciate it, because I kind of felt the one that we attended kind of ended abruptly and then there was no follow-through, and so I think Peter probably has that follow-through, so I'd be interested in what is available after that second meeting. But also, I noticed these things are always hosted in Fort St. John, and so we don't get intake from Chatwin, Tumbler Ridge. It's too far to travel at 7 o'clock at night. So I'm wondering if maybe it's a conversation we could have with Fraser Basin Council, that maybe Dawson Creek could be the more central location to host any future
I'll raise
events.
that with them.
Yeah. So that just something, I mean, we were okay to drive, but Tumbler Ridge and Chetwynd, when I talked to them afterwards, they were like, it was just too far and too late at night, right? So an opportunity there. And two, I introduced myself to Austin in the back corner, and I just want to welcome him to Dawson Creek, and he's our new writer for the Dawson Creek Mirror, so welcome. That's all I got.
Good, thank you. Councillor Parslow.
Just to Councillor Wilbur's comments, the extra material, you're not referring to that set of slides that were sent out to all of us?
No. So we
Okay.
had, that was kind of what we watched, but I'm just thinking within conversation and other stuff that I know Peter would have got more information, and I'd just like to have the rest of the story, as they say.
We'll get a report.
Perfect.
Yeah, through the committee of the whole at the next meeting, we'll
Yeah.
provide an update.
Yeah, awesome.
Good, thank you. Any other Councillor Business? Thank you. Get the minutes of our regular meeting of Council February 26th for adoption. Councillor McFadden, Councillor Rogers, any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Any business arising out of the minute? Correspondence? None? So we're going to go to delegations. We're close enough to 9 o'clock. 6.1, we have Kit Fast, Dawson Creek Watershed Society and watershed staff in attendance regarding World Water Day proclamation. Good morning, Val. Good morning, good morning. Good morning, Kit. Good morning. Good. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Good.
So I'm asking them to stand beside this,
Nice.
okay?
Perfect.
Notice she said I'm asking and not standing.
So whereas an international day to celebrate fresh water was recommended at the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, and the United Nations General Assembly responded by designating March 22nd, 1993 as the first World Water Day. And whereas International World Water Day is held annually on March 22nd as a means of focusing attention on the importance of fresh water and advocating for the sustainable management of freshwater resources. And whereas each year World Water Day highlights a specific aspect of fresh water, and this year's theme is Nature for Water, the City of Dawson Creek is inviting the community to participate in upcoming events and encourages all residents in and around the surrounding community to show the world they care by conserving water. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim March 22nd, 2018 as World Water Day in Dawson Creek. So thank you guys so much. Obviously, the Watershed Society and the Dawson Creek Watershed Group have done a really great job of continuing to raise and maintain the attention and focus on the watershed and the water in our community. And obviously, Councillor Parslow raised it in his councillor business, the flood mitigation and all that whole aspect for us. And so I really appreciate the work that you guys have done in terms of continuing to keep it in focus for us.
Awesome, thank you.
And yeah, the Watershed Society, just like to thank City for all they do on the watershed in Kiskadna and the Dawson Creek watershed. And there's lots going on this year for the Watershed Society. We've got federal funding to do some vegetation restoration and bat monitoring, wildlife monitoring. So there's lots going on, and we appreciate the city's support.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Awesome, thanks.
6.2, we have Peter Nielsen, Energy Manager for the City of Dawson Creek, in attendance regarding our Earth Hour proclamation.
Cindy, it's up there at the mic.
Did you meet the City of Dawson?
Morning, Peter.
Morning.
Morning, Mel.
Morning.
Whereas Earth Hour is a global movement that began in Sydney, Australia in 2007, encouraging individuals, businesses, and governments to take positive actions for the environment by switching off all their lights for one designated hour. And whereas Earth Hour 2018 is being observed from 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. on Saturday, March 24th, and the theme for 2018 is Let Nature Shine. And whereas the City of Dawson Creek will once again participate by shutting off all non-essential lighting and signage at city facilities during Earth Hour, and encourage all residents in and around Dawson Creek to show the world they care by turning lights off during that hour. Now therefore I do hereby proclaim 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. on Saturday, March 24th, 2018 as Earth Hour in Dawson Creek. Thanks, Peter,
Thank you
for all
very
your work.
Much appreciated. It's our chance to
Oh, here.
turn off our lights, and the city does the same, so please do. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I guess I should have turned it on. It's all a series of progressions, right? Next one, we'll get the mic and we'll remember to turn it on.
Next time, that was just step one.
Training
You just have
session
to step
for the
one,
mayor.
everybody.
Our next delegation this morning, item 6.3, is Brennan Eklund from Thrive North Community Coordinator for Futurepreneur Canada. And Brennan's here this morning to provide information on the Thrive North initiative that was been launched in Northeast BC. So good morning, Brennan. And so if you want to do the, you can do it from the delegation table right there, and the mics are there, and your presentation's loaded.
You know that multitasking? She's put the screen down.
So there you go. The floor is yours. You'll have 10 minutes to do your presentation to council and the community.
Okay, I'll do the quick version. Hello everyone, my name is Brennan Eklund. I was born and raised in Fort St. John, so here in the Peace, and recently hired by Futurepreneur Canada as the community coordinator for the Northeast here. So today I'm going to quickly go over what is Futurepreneur and then talk about what Thrive North is and go from there. So Futurepreneur has been around for 22 years. We help 18 to 39-year-olds start businesses. That can be launching them or buying current businesses. We used to be called the Canadian Youth Business Foundation, but 4 years ago we rebranded as Futurepreneur. And we were actually started by some big banks because they realized they weren't serving a target audience, and that being really early staged entrepreneurs at a small scale. It's hard to see this PowerPoint, but this basically just explains that we help entrepreneurs along their whole journey. So we help them with pre-launch coaching all the way to promoting their businesses once they've launched. Here's some just highlights on our organization over the years. We've helped over 10,000 businesses And something interesting is that 40% of them have been majority owned by women. And our Thrive North program is 60% of them have been majority owned by women. So Futurepreneurs, 4 core services is business resources, pre-launch coaching, startup financing, and mentoring. So our main program is our loans program. So this is the eligibility requirement to get a loan from us. We have additional programming, but you don't have to be, it's actually open to anyone, but this is just for the loans. You have to be 18 to 39, you have to be eligible to work in Canada, and you have to be a new full-time business, so in operations for less than a year. You need a viable business plan with 2-year cash flow projections that we help with. And you must be willing to work with a business mentor for 2 years that we match. And you must have 51% ownership of your business. So our business resources are open to everyone, not the eligibility requirements there. So we have a lot of online resources, from helping write a business plan to marketing plans to how to get the most out of your mentoring relationship. We also put on webinars. So this is for people who have ideas, but they just need a little bit of advice on where to go next. And then we do events and workshops. I'm actually hosting our first meetup here in Dawson Creek on March 31st, and it's at the RQ Center. And the point of the meetups is just to have people who are early stage entrepreneurs or people who have ideas just come together and talk about their ideas or their successes or their barriers. And then together, hopefully, we can overcome what barriers there are. Oh yeah, we also have mentor master classes that we put on, which is we get all our mentors together and we do training for them. And then we do business planning workshops and intro to entrepreneurship workshops as well, which are open to everyone in the community. So here's just a little tidbit on our business plan writer. It's very simple and straightforward. Writing a business plan is often daunting for many people starting out. We've had over 90,000 people use it over the years, and yeah, it's just very simple. So here's our entrepreneur in resident. His name's Chad Freiling. He's based out of Vancouver. He does one-on-one support with people who are going through our loans program. So he does sessions on helping you write your business plan, doing your cash flow projections, and advice in all other areas. He's a very, very well-experienced entrepreneur himself. He's bought and owned a lot of different companies. Here's the details on our loan. It's up to $45,000, and it's a collateral-free loan. So we lend on character, not collateral. It's low interest rates for a cash flow loan. It's prime plus 3%, and then prime plus 4%, sorry. And then it's very flexible repayment schedule. So often we have entrepreneurs who they're really successful in their first couple of years, but then they have one bad year and they're struggling for cash. We can help them out in that year and keep them going. So mentoring, I'll touch on quickly. It's just based off of the entrepreneur's needs. We match them with mentors local, but if there's no mentors with their preferred expertise, we'll find someone else within our mentor database, say in Vancouver or wherever. Our loan repayment is 86%, and that's hugely due to the mentor relationship that entrepreneurs gain. So this is Thrive North, which is a specific initiative that Futurepreneur launched 4 years ago in the Northwest, BC, which was in Terrace and Prince Rupert, and it's been very successful. So we got some private funding and funding from the Rural Dividend Fund to launch it here in the Northeast. So we've been around for 2 months here now. And what is Thrive North? It's got some additional programming elements, 2 categories: direct support and marketing. So we do customized training, so we do more customized workshops. So we'll go out to Aboriginal communities if they'd like and do intro to entrepreneurship workshops. And we do a lot more one-on-one. And a big part of my role is the one-on-one work with entrepreneurs. Then we have different funding options, which is we have a small projects grant, which is up to $1,500, and it's for really early staged entrepreneurs who just need a little kickstart in getting their business going. And then we have the business challenge that we hold every year, which it has 3 different categories with $10,000 prizes for entrepreneurs. It's kind of like a friendly Dragon's Den. The past 3 years it's been in the Northwest, but this year it's going to be in the Northeast, and that's going to be October 4th and 5th. It's like a big community event. Last year they had 100 people in the audience, and there's also an audience award. So kind of like a friendly Dragon's Den. And then as far as marketing community events, we have a lot of creativity and money in our budget to partner with local organizations on hosting creative events that help entrepreneurs. And that is basically it. So I guess I'm here today just to look for ideas and ways that I can reach out to young entrepreneurs in Dawson Creek who could potentially benefit from our services.
Perfect. Thank you, Brennan.
Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Parsons.
What you presented is a reminder of the elements we had in our Youth Enterprise Centre here in Dawson Creek. We had the first Youth Enterprise Centre in Canada. And it started off with a flourish and had many of the elements that you outlined. As money became tight, and there's a host of other reasons as well, the centre was closed. We had hoped, I say we, speaking the school district, had hoped that the business community, the chamber, the city, the college would all get behind it in cash flow and so on. So I wish you well. I suggest you set up a strong relationship with school district principals, the high school and middle school, and you might want to see if you can, well, the teacher of the Enterprise Centre has passed on now, but you might want to speak to a lady called Doris Brocky. She's involved with the farmers market at the present time, yes, and has a business called Strawberries
Rhubarb to Roses.
Rhubarb to Roses.
We'll get you the information, Brendan. Yeah.
Yeah. They would be essentially, there's been many young entrepreneurs through that program, developed, supported through that program. Gary Scott might be another person. He was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Further questions? So thank you so much for coming in this morning and giving us this presentation, and it's twigged me for a couple of things. And so we do in the fall, there's a business-to-business session hosted by Community Futures in partnership with the Encanted Event Center. It's usually in the fall, September, October. I don't know if it's scheduled yet for this fall, but it's a great opportunity to kind of reach into the community and the region because it's well represented, to be able to raise that profile of the message. And also, as Councillor Parslow suggests, the school district, but the chamber as well as the college, because the college just hosted Skills Canada, and there was a ton of young folks in there that would, I guarantee, would be a great message for them to hear about the opportunities as they're starting to move forward. So really appreciate you coming in this morning, and I'll make a point of getting you some contact information at the end of the day today when we're finished council.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated.
Good.
Okay.
Brendan, thanks a lot for coming in this morning.
Your worship, if
Oh,
we
go
could
ahead.
just add Sue Kenny from Community Futures to that too, because they just launched a young junior Dragon's Den event, so that might be worth having conversation with her and partnering up on some of their programs.
Yeah, we know Sue well now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call you. Okay.
Good. Brendan, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Appreciate it. You can just leave it there, it's fine. Our next delegation this morning, 6.4, we have Wendy Davies from the BC Society of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, SPCA. In attendance, we're going to follow up on the vicious dogs information and bylaw. Good morning, Wendy.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Get my information out. So I will try not to keep you guys too long. There are so many things, exciting things going on with the BCSBCA right now. I could talk to you all morning.
You're not going to be allowed to do that.
So I'll try to not keep you too long. So I know that we're coming back on the vicious dogs process for the city of Dawson Creek following an incident, a previous incident with the Canada Post. And so I think that this is a great moment for us to look at addressing something that does need to be improved for the city. I know that I've spent nearly a decade here now working on bylaws and improving, working for the people and animals of our community. And our current vicious dogs process is in need of improvement. Right now, we have a situation where our bylaws are very vague and don't address a lot of the specifics when it comes to vicious dogs. We know that there's a difference between a vicious dog a dog that perhaps bites, does a single bite to get somebody to go away if they're afraid, or maybe bites taking a ball from somebody, to the cases where we have dogs that do attack or kill or maim other animals or people. And unfortunately, our bylaw as it currently stands paints all of those animals with a single brush. So I think that addressing some of the definitions in our bylaws is really necessary and something that we should work together with the city to improve. I am already working with the bylaw department in looking at other communities that have better processes in place. And one of the cities we're looking at right now is the city of Calgary. Does have a very good vicious dog section in their bylaws. So I'd like to look at that as something that we can move forward with the city in 2018 to address those concerns, to get us a better definition. The second portion of that I'd like to address is the process that we currently have for appeals. Now, not a lot of cities have a process for appeals, from what I understand, but it's something that I think the city of Dawson Creek should have. When it comes to vicious dogs, we can address the bylaw portion, but in the bylaw, I think we should have a process for appeals. So when people come to council, whether it is the animal owner saying that their animal isn't vicious, or the person who the victim of the situation. The challenge with appeals right now, without a proper process in place and proper information documents for you to know some of the science behind animal behavior. We end up with where we had a person who they want more done. And, without actual information where our councils have, to actually guide them along, we don't have a proper process for you. And I think that's really important, and hopefully will be something that other communities will come on board with as well. I think that having proper science-based information. I know there's been some questions about what happened with the assessment process that happened. And so I kind of want to just touch base on that very briefly. First of all, nearly a decade, I've only had one or two cases come forward, and it's not something that happens very often. The reason the assessment process came forward is because if, in other communities, if there's a vicious dog case where a community does decide to go to court and look to have the animal seized and potentially destroyed, that has to come through a judge. And in most cases, when we start looking at things across the province right now, when these cases come forward, they can take a year and a half to 2 years to proceed. It can cost communities between $80,000 and $100,000 per case to go forward in the court process. And what we're seeing happen now is quite often the judges involved or the responsible involved are now ordering assessment. So at the end of that long, expensive process, the courts were ordering an assessment for the dog and a plan for the dog to be managed. So when we looked at the case that we were dealing with last, we decided to jump to the chase, really, and go for the much cheaper version of going to what most judges are ordering home. Now the exciting news on that is considered to be a very, as the city often is, a leading approach to these cases. And Dr. Ledger, who did come up at the time to assess the dog, is a court-recommended assessment ratio on him, and is often the often that courts call forward to assessment. Dr. Ledger was so impressed by the city of Dawson Creek approach to this case that she's actually preparing right now a presentation that she will be presenting across Canada and internationally to recommend that communities in the future, this should be the first step, the first process. To address it, it is a very positive way to interact with the members of the community through the dog program, and a way to approach it in an educational way to keep our community safe instead of a way just fighting our members of the community. So, she was so impressed. Dr. Ledger is notorious for not being able to reach her or get her to come forth. And this woman made time for the city of Dawson Creek in a matter of weeks, which is unheard of. When I tell people that happens here, they're shocked. But it was because of our proactive approach to this that Dr. Ledger made time to make sure she was safe. So it was a really impressive process. I know that there are some people who have questioned and asked if we could have somebody available to do that type of assessment. But I can tell you, she's a doctor. She has years of experience, and somebody who would be qualified to do that type of qualified assessment is, a very highly educated person, and we do not have the resources to have a person like that here at our shelter. The BCSPCA currently doesn't have a person at that level. I'm not saying they wouldn't in the future, but when we consider this as a one-off in a decade, I don't think this is something that we would look at having at our shelter anyways, and something that if it does happen in the future, that we just address it as we get. But I think that improving our bylaws and having a field process will assist that decision making. I certainly can look at that more with you, and we'll work closely with the senior staff of the city to establish that improvement. The other thing I really wanted to touch on is our bylaws for the city of Dawson Creek. Now, I attend conferences. I go to a lot of conferences and things that have other community stakeholders there, and I can tell you that the city of Dawson Creek is being held at the top as a leader as a main community for bylaws to protect animals and their communities. I have had other communities come forth to me asking me how we're doing it, talking to me about our current situation up here. Our stats speak for themselves. I mean, the drop up from 73% of people coming in from the city to 31% in 2 years, those are staggering stats. Licensing is a lot of people say, well, animal licensing is a money grab. Well, I can tell you that animal licensing gets animals home. It keeps animals out of the shelters. We've seen an increase of return to ownership of cats from 10% to 40% in 2 years' time. We expect to see that number continue to rise. We see other organizations investing in the city of Dawson Creek because of the bylaws that we all passed a couple of years ago. We've had the Vancouver Foundation and PetSmart Charities of Canada both issue large grants just for the city of Dawson Creek to expand their cats. We anticipate to fix approximately 600 cats in the city in the last 2 years' time. And all of those animals are now microchipped and tattooed and registered with the city of Dawson Creek. Those animals go home when they come into the building. If an animal comes in licensed, they typically are returned home within 24 hours, both dogs and cats. So we're starting to see a significant shift, and people are taking notice of this. I was contacted last year. Actually, before I go into that, I wanted to let you know that we just did a review of the vets in this program. And what the vets have reported is that the number of cats fixed through the program are in addition to what they would typically fix. So, if they had normally fixed 300 cats and we had 200 cats go through the program, they actually fixed almost 500 cats. So what we're seeing happen is the people who are fixing these cats are likely people who wouldn't have fixed their cats anyway without some sort of program available or some sort of motivation. The BCSPCA is releasing a postcard out to the residents of the city of Dawson Creek right now, letting them know that the program is about to end. And on the postcard, it will say that if you do not take advantage of the program, you will be responsible for the $200 license fee for your cat. And licensing is something that we plan on focusing on in the next, over 2018 and journey more. I'm not going to leave that component. Through this process, an interesting thing has happened at the shelter. We've actually helped more animals at the shelter in 2017 than we've seen over the last 3 to 4 years, by an increase of almost 200 animals. We typically help around 500, over 500 animals, and we helped 745 animals last year. And that is because we're able to move these animals to food, they're not sitting there. I used to see cats in our shelter 300 days, and now 3 weeks is a really long time for them to sit in our shelter. And because we're able to move those animals through so quickly, we're able to help more animals. So it's an amazing process where we're keeping people in the community happy. One of the really exciting things that has happened in the last few months is I was contacted by the University of British Columbia. They were doing a study on cat overpopulation. The study is here, and we can get this off to all of you, anyone who wants to read it. But we're one of 7 communities, and we were approached because of our cat bylaws. And they were doing a study to see what communities can do to help address cat overpopulation in Canada. And the 3 recommendations that were determined from this study were that communities should have cat licensing programs, they should engage in cat spay neuter programs, and they should have programs that address at-large cats. So they should have at-large laws for cats. And from what I understood from the gentleman I was working with on this is we're the only community in British Columbia doing all 3 of those things already. So we are the only community enforcing cat at-large laws that I understand. So if there is another one, I'm not aware of it. And because of those things, we are right now, I would say, the leader in British Columbia addressing cat overpopulation. So thank you all for setting this all in motion in 2015. So, I'm off track now. I wanted to touch base really quickly too on the decision we've made last year on our future contract and the increase to 1.5 for our shelter. Again, I've been doing this nearly a decade, and there was 2 things that caused significant strain on myself. That was the inadequate coverage for personnel coverage for animal control and inadequate coverage for animal cruelty in the north. So the lack of a constable in the region. And last year, you guys made a decision that really changed the future for myself. Thank you. I want to thank all of you guys for doing that. We are currently without an officer. Our officer did leave us, and we are currently without an officer again, but we are hiring 1.5 people right now. I know that in the future that the chance of this happening again is going to be greatly reduced. And we have some really great applicants coming forth right now. If everything goes forward as it's looking, we'll be bringing in somebody from the Regina Humane Society, as well as somebody who's currently studying policing in Ontario. So, these are people who, the lady who's looking from Ontario was very excited about our bylaws and how progressive the city of Dawson Creek is, and she wants a future in animal protection, and she felt that the city of Dawson Creek is a wonderful place for her to start. So this is really exciting things that we're starting to see really good applicants come forth who want to move here and work for us. Because that weight has been lifted off me, I've been able to then turn my direction, my determination down to the British Columbia Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals and ask them about the lack of constable coverage in our region. In January, I was able to make a breakthrough with our senior staff and CEO and really helped them see the need of the Peace region. And we've now had a commitment and a real shift in the coverage of cruelty investigations in the north. In the last 3 weeks, I've seen 3 different very qualified constables handling all of the cases in the Peace region. It is very exciting for me, and it is something we're having a major meeting on Wednesday of this week with our senior staff, and this will be something that we'll be looking at making sure there's always cruelty coverage here. So when you're seeing those uniforms out there with cruelty investigations on the back of them, this is exciting news for our region and making sure that we always have the animals protected, that need to be protected here. I mean, having both of these things covered is like a decade worth of work, and weight lifted off of me. On an exciting news on that point, we will be breaking ground on the new facility this spring. And as part of the cruelty coverage, we're looking at having the city of Dawson Creek be the hub, the central location for housing cruelty investigations. We're going to be looking at potentially putting a trailer on the property or something where people can stay, to make sure that if we don't have an officer hired here right now, we will have access for people to come up on a weekly basis and make sure that there's always somebody there to cover. So, I mean, two huge things, and I'd like you guys to know that a couple of weeks ago we had our advocacy team, our provincial advocacy team and community relations team get together, and I was talking with one of the members last week, and she told me that the city of Dawson Creek was discussed extensively as a leader in humane societies, humane communities in British Columbia, that we were really flagged as being one of the leaders. So, I mean, that's all of us working together. Thank you so much. On a final kind of fun note, I did just receive a notification that, so when we flooded a couple years ago here, a little tiny beaver came into our care. She went to the Wild Art, our wildlife rehabilitation facility in Vancouver, and she's now ready to be released. So I will be contacting the city and working with the city to determine the right place to release her, where there's not already a family of beavers, so she can settle in. But this will be something that's happening this spring, and we'll invite everybody to come down and be part of this beaver coming back to the city of Dawson Creek to be released here. So that's really fun stuff.
Wendy, we don't want any beavers here.
Well, we'll find a good spot to put her. Let's figure out the right spot. That's
Chetwynd Davis has donated a nice sign, so why don't I donate a beaver to Chetwynd?
Thank you. Sorry, you.
So just on a very final note, one of the things you can see, obviously, we just talked about vicious dog process changes in the bylaw. I've been working quite closely with the bylaw department, and we will be bringing, you'll see very soon, some little bit of housekeeping stuff on our bylaw. We're constantly working on improving our bylaw, so there's going to be some errors and omissions. We'll be bringing forth some just housekeeping on the bylaw for approval, and you'll see that very soon.
Thank you, Wendy. Great bit of information, and as always, we appreciate the passion for you in terms of helping the animals and the residents in our community with an improved quality of life. Any questions of Wendy? Councillor Javeka?
Just a comment. I appreciate your comments about how great council is, but, you know, you should be taking a lot of credit for these changes.
Yeah. And I want to follow up with the point about this PetSmart program, that it was $75,000 that they've put into our community for the city of Dawson Creek residents who want to have a cat spayed or neutered. And I've heard from people outside the community wishing that they could be able to bring their animals here to have that service. And I think it's an amazing gesture, and it is a compliment to, I think, Wendy and the city in terms of having put that kind of emphasis into an increase from 30 to 70% of cats, right? It's crazy. So, anyway, thank you, Wendy. We appreciate you coming in this morning, and obviously all the work you've done to this. And we're looking forward to the groundbreaking. We're going to be there. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and I just sorry.
Go ahead.
I just finished reading while you were talking, I was cruising through the Calgary animal bylaw thing, and there's a lot of good things that are in there. I noticed that we're way behind on a lot of the fees and charges that you're charging, because in here, even an unlicensed dog is $250. So does that mean we're thinking about catching those fees up?
Well, it's something we'll look at. Calgary's not just we'll look at sort of numerous number of bylaws, but yeah, it is quite a good bylaw.
Because I'm just thinking the amount of money that the citizens pay for your service, it's valued, but it can't keep going up and up and up every year. So it's got to come down. So I think that's a way of doing it.
No, I agree, and as when we look at animal responsibility bylaw, really the fees and responsibilities of those animals should fall on the animal owners.
Yeah, I like the responsible pet ownership bylaw. Anyways.
Councillor Wilbur.
Well, thank you, Wendy, for all the work you do, and I think to your point about Calgary, it was read the vicious dog part of that bylaw. That's exactly what we want. But just for the people that are going to be watching this, if they get their cat or spayed or neutered, it's $5 for licensing. If they do not, they're going to pay the $200 plus licensing, or is that included in it?
So the $200 is the license fee for an intact cat in the city of Dawson Creek. However, that license can be used to get your cat fixed in the year of that license.
So there you go. So it's $5 or $200, folks. So get your cat spayed and neutered.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Than's, Wendy.
Thank you.
So we're going to take a 7-minute recess. Councillor Schumann, you're still with us?
Wendy?
She's skiing.
I'm here.
Good job. Thank you. We're going to take about a 5 to 7-minute break.
Chickens.
Okay.
On the TV.
Order, and we're back into our agenda at item 7, reports. 7.1, sorry? Oh, we just got to get Cheryl back.
You just can't hear it.
Uh-oh.
You've actually been yelling this whole time.
Swearing.
Hello.
Hi, Cheryl. We're back.
Okay, I'm here.
So we'll call ourselves back in, and we're at 7.1. We have a memo from our Deputy Director of Corporate Administration regarding the Peace River Regional District Economic Development Distribution. I want to speak to this very quickly because, like the budget process that's undergoing for us, it's undergoing the same at the regional district. Unfortunately, this got dealt with again on Thursday at the regional district board meeting, and there's been some more changes, and so and I've recommended some more changes from us, and so I just want to explain this kind of very quickly. Is that this requisition is one that has gone on annually for economic development through the Economic Development Commission. It isn't something that we as the City of Dawson Creek specifically through our budget are impacted by, but through the regional one. And so it got dealt with again on Thursday. There's more iterations. And I recommended, because I was worried about the geopark at the last time because of the amount, but everybody's back in, and so it stayed in, so I've recommended we go back in. I'll bring back a final report once it's concluded in a couple of weeks, and so I would like to suggest at this point that we simply table this report until it's finalized at the RD, and then I can bring it back through its final iteration once it's approved at the RD. And so if that's appropriate, Brenda, just to table it? Or just...
This motion was already, in fact, made. It needs to be ratified by council, and I understand that there is changes coming, but then that would just require a new motion.
Okay, all right. So we just need to ratify this, receipt of this.
Correct.
Good. Councillor McFadden, Councillor Parslow, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And I will say very quickly, from the positive perspective, we did approve the $5,000 for the airport marketing initiative to carry on with, $7,500 to the South Peace Love initiative, $7,500 to the South Peace Medical Society. So that's another good one. $10,000 to the business-to-business conference that's ongoing, and then another $7,500 into that business directory, the South Peace Business Directory, so we can continue that work. So that's all very, very positive stuff that's going on. Thank you. So 7.2, we have report number 18033 from the Development Services Manager regarding the development variance permit for AgriSource. Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, I'd move that report number 18033 from the Development Services Manager, redevelopment variance permit 17-01. to vary the front setback of a M2 industrial light industrial zone driveway from 3 meters to 0.3 meters, and to vary the building height from 14 meters to 16 meters, be received. Further, that staff be authorized to proceed with issuance of development variance permit 17-01.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Javetkov. Discussion? Had a meeting with Kane Piper and John, I can't think of the other gentleman's name. Anyway, but really positive development that they're going to do there in terms of warehousing and enhanced fertilizer, their fertilizer operation and grain handling and sales and all of that, and gave us an overview of kind of the amount of traffic and volumes and stuff. And it's just a real good positive signal in terms of adding that service into our agricultural sector, of which the community was built on. So really appreciate the confidence that these guys have shown in the community and moving forward with building their business to support the agricultural sector. Any comments, questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 7.3, report number 18035 from the Director of Corporate Administration regarding the appointment of election officials. Councillor Wilbur?
Sure, I'll remove that report number 18-035 from the Director of Corporate Administration regarding the appointment of election officials be received. Further, that pursuant to Part 3, Section 58 of the Local Government Act, that Brenda Ginter be appointed Chief Election Officer, and that Cindy Fisher and Janet Loisel be appointed as Deputy Chief Election Officers for conducting the 2018 general local election, with power to appoint other election officials as required for the administration and conduct of the 2018 general local election.
Thank you. Seconded?
Second that.
Councillor Schumann. Discussion?
They always do a great job, so happy to appoint them.
Good. And the election date is?
October 20th.
October 20th. Thank you. Any further questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaws, item 8, their manufactured home park bylaw 4368 for consideration of third reading and adoption. Councillor Javetkov, seconded. Councillor Rogers. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item 9, Mayor's business. The Northeast Coalition held a forum up in Fort St. John last week or the week before, and I went up and had the opportunity to meet in the evening with Inez Piccinino, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Upstream Development of for the Ministry of Natural Gas. Spent an hour or so with Inez just talking about the upstream development, the initiatives that are going on here, the impacts and the potential for the development of the upstream, anticipating the final investment decisions by LNG Canada, Shell, and their partners for this third quarter of 2018. It still seems like it's very much on point and on track for that. The one issue that they're worried about and they're dealing with is the federal industrial steel tariff, FIST they call it, through the federal government have imposed a steel tariff of I think 30 or 40% on the steel for the manufacture of some of these huge modules that are built for both anticipated to be supplied for LNG Canada for the LNG facilities. Apparently these things are manufactured in Korea and China, are shipped over here. There isn't anyone that can manufacture or produce or construct these modules in Canada, and yet they're going to be subsidized or going to be subject to the tariff of 30 or 40%, which adds potentially $300 or $400 million into the capital projects for these guys. So they're really worried about it in terms of adding costs onto these projects. And from that perspective, we're just working on a proposed trip to Ottawa with Mayor Ackerman, Mayor Germuth, Chief Councillor from the Heisla to go to Ottawa to meet with the Federal Minister of Finance, who's the one responsible for this decision on tariff, to make the lobbying effort to them to consider removing the tariff from these modules that are going to be proposed. And we're looking at hopefully making that trip potentially next week. We're just working on coordinating some dates and get that in front of the minister or the ministers. Item 2, we had the kindness meters, the second or third iteration of our kindness meters, and so we presented a check for nearly $500 to Step Up and Ride and to the Special Olympics were this 2 segments, and again, that change in those meters continue to drive some benefit back into our community charitable organizations, and TransCanada with that matching money has been a real nice gesture. So we did the presentation last week or the week before to the 2 organizations, have drawn 2 more, and we've changed the process now that they'll go for a year. So each organization, or each of the 2 organizations, will go for a year and make it a little bit more lucrative for them. So that continues to move on, and we'll continue to leverage that money that TransCanada gave to help benefit our community organizations. We had a Pink Shirt Day event at the Fire Hall on the anti-bullying message, and we had a group of children from the Mountain Christian School were there and did a little skit that they had prepared for messaging around anti-bullying, and the Fire Hall and city staff were all there to host a lunch for them, and had a real nice dinner time event, and really appreciate the efforts of city staff and CUPE in terms of helping organize it, and also to the Mountain Christian School for participating. We had an invitation. I had invited out the Tourism Advisory Committee, or those members that were part of that Tourism Advisory Committee for the city last year, and I just wanted to have a quick follow-up with them. Those folks stepped up and gave a bunch of time into representing that Tourism Advisory Committee, and just kind of give them a follow-up now in terms of the new contract that's in place with Spectra, and how we move forward and the implications for that. And then once we get a little further down the road, I would assume this summer, this fall, once the tourism and structure is a little more completed and in place, and we have a little more detail around the event and sport tourism, we can then bring that back to council and to get council's perspective on whether we want to continue to have that Tourism Advisory Committee work as a arm of the council to help provide that direction and support to tourism as well as council, and we'll bring that back. I just wanted to have a follow-up and close the loop a little bit with those folks, and we did that last week. I attended the Peace Williston Advisory Committee meeting last Friday. It was at Soto in Moberly Lake, and the Peace Williston Advisory Committee is a committee that's been in operation, I'm going to say, for 15 or 20 years at least, made up of communities that are impacted or affected by the Williston Reservoir, and we meet about every 3 months, 4 months, talk about any issues or initiatives that are ongoing by and through BC Hydro, as well as for the communities. It was really good to be at Soto on Friday, and they're now members and have been members of the committee, and we were hosted at Soto and toured a nursery, that greenhouse that the Soto have twin sisters in Soto, and I'm kind of feeling that isn't the right name. Anyway, they do traditional plants. And
Twin Peaks, isn't it?
They call it Twin Sisters, and that's part of that. Anyway, so they do traditional plants as well as other plants. I think they have 6 or 8 people full-time employed, and it's been a real enterprise for them in terms of creating a joint venture with West Moberly and Soto, and it was really interesting to see the work, and they're starting their springtime work now on some of those traditional plants, and it was really very interesting. And Soto are really engaging in terms of reaching out into communities and forging relationships, and so I'm going to take the opportunity to invite Soto Chief Cameron and our councillors Owens and Parento and Paquette, and I forget the fourth, but I'd like to invite them to city of Dawson Creek. I want to have them tour our community and our infrastructure, water, sewer, facilities, and look at partnerships and look at ways that we can help build and enhance our relationship with our Treaty 8 Tribal Association communities. And they're very interested in it because they're looking at doing some water and sewer infrastructure work, and they'd like to see how and what we have. They have no internal resources to be able to help guide them. They're entirely reliant on folks who are in the business of consultant to provide that expertise when they're doing projects. And so they really are interested in coming and looking at our facilities, and they've been very supportive. They're really supportive of the message around healthcare and education, and supporting us with that message of our Dawson Creek District Hospital renovation project. I want to be a part of that message with the provincial government. So I can see nothing but very strong outcomes from working with Treaty 8 communities, as well as both Soto and West Moab as our South Peace neighbors. And I had reached out to Roland Wilson, the chief of West Moab as well, and the hospital and the South Peace Business Directory and things like that. And he's working on a date for me to get in front of their council as well. So anyway, the Peace River Wilson Advisory Committee, we talked about a number of initiatives and issues ongoing, and it's just an informative day and worthwhile attending. Any questions on that? And so my plan is to, and I'll bring it back through to council, but probably in April sometime, to find a date where we can bring the Soto in, and we'll spend a day. I'll set it up with council, and we'll set a day to tour the community and host them, and looking at infrastructure and engage staff, and look at the water treatment plant, the reclaim plant, the water system in terms of storage, and our weir, and all of that, because they're very interested in it, as well as our facilities.
Some brownfields downtown.
Yeah. Well, and so then that follows in that, you know, we had that that discussion and presentation by Urban Systems on the urban economic zones and partnerships with your First Nations neighbors, and maybe there's some opportunities there. But I think it's the first step is engage and interact with and introduce ourselves as our councils, respective councils and members, and where our common initiatives are that we can work together to strengthen our communities, both theirs and ours. So.
Yeah. Excellent.
The next item is item 6 is our reclaimed water rates, and so last year was a real kind of a positive in terms of the amount of revenue that we generated into the community, the city, for the sale of that reclaimed water. And so in discussions with administration, the sale of that reclaimed water isn't tied into our water and sewer utility rates as it is under that bylaw, and we're going to review that bylaw this year for the charges and fees that we have for our potable water and sewer rates, and we're going to bring the truck waste facility on stream, and we're going to look at that in terms of fees for that. But the reclaimed water and the sale of that reclaimed water is a standalone by agreement, and we can set that rate accordingly by agreement. And so I want to make the recommendation today to council that we've had a $2.50 fee at the truck fill station for that additional 600 cubes that we can sell to industry, and it hasn't been adjusted since the facility opened. And I'd like to recommend at this time that we raise that fee from $2.50 a cube to $3.50 a cube, because there's strong demand for it. It's still far under. The fee was set when it first opened half of what the potable rate was to try to move the demand off potable onto reclaimed. We've seen that happen, and we're seeing increased costs of everything we do, not only in the operation of it, but servicing it of those facilities and administering it, that I think we should move it up to $3.50 a cube. Councillor Roger?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Second? Councillor Parslow, discussion? Duncan, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so through your worship, if I can give a little context, maybe.
Sure.
I was made aware this was going to come forward, and I prepared a little bit of information. So we provide that reclaim service, that truck fill station. Our neighbors don't have those opportunities, and so they have non-potable bulk water rates, essentially. Grand Prairie charges, as of February 1st, $9.94 a cube for bulk water. Fort St. John charges $8.50 per cube for non-domestic water use. Right now, for our reclaim, we're charging $2.50. For commercial non-potable, we charge $4.50. Our rate, our $2.50 rate, was built as an incentive to move people away from our potable water. We're going to be reviewing that number or those rates this year. $3.50, increasing our rate from $2.50 to $3.50 fits within the market. it fits within that incentive. I would just put that out there to council, that number may further increase or may further change when we have a better understanding of our water rates after we conduct a review. But for an interim, $1, we don't see that as an issue.
Councillor Rogers?
Yeah, my thoughts were, there hasn't been an increase. There's been inflationary costs. Maintenance costs to that facility are, because of the age of it, we're looking at an increase in operating costs for that facility as well. And then we've had that over the years, so we've actually kind of gone backwards over the last few years.
One of the invisibles that I think part of that water and sewer utility, as I think about it, and reclaimed as an example, is we snowplow. We manage finance, manage the accounts, administration, manage the operation. So that all gets pulled into our overall budget of operating, but never gets reflected back into the overall rates that we charge for some of those utilities. And I think that we should be, and I think it's entirely appropriate that we haven't looked at that rate for a long time, a strong demand for it, and I think we're leaving some money on the table that can help us as a city enhance infrastructure and enhance the overall revenues that are coming to our community to help offset and reduce the impact on our business and residents. Councillor Parslow?
Just a couple of related questions. Just ballpark figures. How much has been spent since it's been operating on maintenance, replacement of cells or whatever?
So through your worship, through your worship. So this year, I believe, is the first year we're really committing capital through the capital program, Kevin, and it's 600 and about 750. And as far as operational budget, Councillor Rogers informs me it's 330.
About 330,000, I think,
Yeah.
for wages and stuff like that.
So Adam has a number here as well.
Last year we spent $287,000
On maintenance?
operating the water reclaim facility.
Operating it.
Yeah.
So we sell 600 cubes a day at $2.50 a cube, so you're at 14,000.
So through your worship, I don't know that the truck fill was utilized as much as the seaplane base last year, but right now, with the caveat that the last week or two we haven't seen the truck sales as we have, and that could be anything, but we have the ability to sell $600 cubes a day through the truck fill.
But the point is, the cost, that maintenance cost is being, the revenue stream is from the water sales?
Correct. Sorry, Kev? No, sorry, yeah. So through your worship, it is considered part of the sewer utility right now, the reclaim, Adam? Yeah, so it's considered part of the sewer utility.
So the next question is sort of related to that. All these facilities, they get built, they eventually need to be replaced. Is any money being set aside for the eventual replacement of that facility as we progress?
So through your worship, I don't believe that we have set up a specific DCC, for instance, for that, but we do have an infrastructure charge, Kevin, and maybe you could talk about that infrastructure charge and creates the surplus. I put you on the spot with that one, but the intent is that replaces existing infrastructure.
Yeah, so the infrastructure charge is more for the linear infrastructure within the community, but that facility, thank you.
Does Kevin have a mic?
I do now. So the thought would be that fee that we charge at that facility should pay for the operating and should pay for the future replacement of it. That's really how you should set that. Now that that facility's run since 2012, so we've got 5.5, 6 years of use, we can start to understand better, obviously, what those operating costs are, because going into it, we could speculate, but you don't know until you're into it and any of the issues you may have. But now we've got those trends, we can see, obviously, what those costs and then future replacements would be. That's how, in my mind, that fee should be established.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, because eventually I keep thinking even bigger picture, how is the community ever going to replace the Encana Event Center 50, 100 years from now if it doesn't start saving for it, On a smaller scale, this, I think, as they look at the future and what's happening in an increasing number of communities, particularly south of the border, I see even if the demand for fresh water drops, I can see other uses for it. I think it's a key part of our infrastructure, and revenue received should be set aside for its eventual replacement, as well as its maintenance.
So through your worship, the work this year that's taking place and has been included in the capital plan is being funded through the sewer utility.
And as I say, to me, the fact that I think we sold close to $1 million worth of reclaimed water last year, which was very, very positive. And if you think about the strong demand at 30 days out of the month at 600 cubes, at $250 a cube is about $45,000 a month in revenue. $350 a cube means it's $65,000 a month. So there's another almost $250,000 for us in additional revenue that I think we were leaving on the table by not leveraging that facility the way we should. And exactly to that point, to the facility, to capital, and to the overall operation of the city in terms of reducing some of those impacts to our residents and business communities. So I think honestly, it's not tied to a bylaw. It's not tied to our water and sewer rates. It's by agreement. It's done what we'd hoped it would do, and certainly now it's a very positive, and there's lots of demand, and we should be leveraging it. Further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. That's it for me under Mayor's business.
I have
Go ahead.
One question of you
Yep.
under Mayor's business. We had people here from the Rotary Club concerning the Rotary Lake public meeting. Has any progress occurred from the point of view of engagement of provincial politicians, and when have you got a sense of when we might be having that public meeting?
Yeah, so we had the conversation with the Deputy Minister of Health, and when I talked to him about, gosh, I'm going to say 2 or 3 weeks ago now, and we talked about the hospital, and I raised the issue of Rotary Lake. I fed him a copy of the correspondence we had received from Northern Health in regards to the direction that they had given to us and conditions, and the deputy said he would follow it up with Northern Health and would respond to me. I'll follow that up this week in terms of finding out what their direction is and what their comments are going to be following that discussion we've had with them. I haven't had anything. I am waiting for the Minister of Health. We did send the invitation to him for the visit up here to see the hospital that he had asked us to do, and that was about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I haven't heard from them. So I do have it in kind of my diary to get back to them, because those 2 items are still on the discussion with them, and I haven't heard back from them. Anything further? Good. Diary? Nothing? Duncan?
So through your worship, maybe just Kevin, OCP, we're expecting to have that back in front of council March 26th, is that what?
We're sorry, your call did not go through. Please try your call again, or dial 0 and the TELUS operator will be happy to help you.
That doesn't sound.
Bye, Cheryl.
Yeah, through your worship, the intent is to try and get the OCP in front of council at the next meeting this month.
Okay, good. Consent calendar? Motion?
To receive?
Councillor Parslow, seconded. Councillor Rogers, discussion? We're just doing consent calendar, Cheryl. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Strategic priorities, Duncan?
So through your worship, we have confirmed the date with Gord McIntosh for the service capacity review and prioritization, and that involvement of council is June 18th at 4 p.m. I believe the invites have gone out.
Yes, it has. Question and answer period?
No one has signed up, your worship.
Can we remove that?
That's in the plans.
Good. Media question period. Austin, anything? Thank you. So at this point, we'll need a motion to recess to closed, and
So moved.
Councillor Wilbur, Councillor Rogers, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So we'll take 5 minutes to go to
Duncan.
closed.
Could you
Open our public meeting for public budget consultation for 2018. I would say that 2018, like 2017 and 16 and 15, we started this budget work with council, say probably 3 months ago in December. Council started to, November, December, started to work away on the preparation work for 2018. It probably is, I think, the most attention, the most amount of work that council do in terms of taking the approach that the fiscal aspect of our responsibilities as the governance board for the city and providing the direction for how and what services we provide in the community and how those are provided and all of the associated costs that go with that and the decisions around that is a ton of work for council and administration and staff, and a whole bunch of work goes into getting to this stage where we're ready to start to engage the public in the direction that we're going to take for the financial year 2018 for the city. And so I'm really happy to be here, and obviously in terms of kicking it off and being in a position where we can start to engage and move it forward. So I want to thank Duncan and Adam and all the staff, the senior staff and the managers and staff in the organization who plow through all this stuff on a regular basis to get us to the point where we can get this bit of work completed. So with that, I want to turn it over. Adam, our new old CFO, I'll use that term today, is going to give us and walk through the budget. And Adam, thanks for leading us through this, and I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent, thank you. My name's Adam Langenmeyer. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. So one of my sole responsibilities is the preparation of the budget. I go off of the basis that council sets the stage for what we want to try to get done. And following the community vision statement and the corporate mission statement are some of the guiding factors that I take into consideration. Moving beyond that, the topics that have come more important over the past months that I've been here that I've really seen repetition is, how can the city be fiscally responsible? What is the best bang for the taxpayers' bucks, and how do we use the community's money for the best benefit? Next on is, how do you build a community? And a key part of that is community is quality of life. If you don't want to live in the community and you don't have a quality of life, well, we may as well just pack up and go home to another community. But that all has to be balanced with, the fun part of quality of life, but also the sustainability of the pieces of infrastructure that people don't see, the water, the sewer. People see the roads, but behind the scenes, how do we keep the community going with the stuff that they need to use every day, but it's not fun and exciting to talk about, like a pool or a skating rink, for instance. Further to that, this is an area that has been growing in the municipal government, is how can the community help grow the economy within its town? And Mayor is a key example of this, has taken over the economic development officer role for the city. And diversification is essential, and that's what is one of the pieces we're trying to work towards. And within that, we can tie it to town hall itself. How do we work with the staff we have to maximize all of these areas? How do we become more fiscally responsible? Well, one way is working within our own organization and taking our strengths and really building off of them. And that's a shift in our organization, and Duncan may speak to that later on, but it's key. It's, the saying, it's easier to save a dollar than make a dollar. Well, if you already have organizational capacity, how do we leverage that to get the most done? And from that, so The really big highlights that have come out are how do we address the fiscal gap? This is ongoing. Almost every council meeting, it's discussed in one form or another. Next, I go into how do I figure out how to implement what council wants to do and give them information and data so they can make a good decision. And the final two are let's keep our town reinvesting itself through capital, roads, infrastructure, and then the final one is debt reduction. It's something that is becoming far too acceptable, not just in municipalities, but just in society overall. Oh, we'll just take out a loan for that and pay for it in the future. Future us will worry about that. But council has seen that you can't always do that. We got to pay down debts and work with what we have. So, speaking on that point, where will the money come from? The municipality, the main way they get funding is through taxation. The Northeast is lucky, is very fortunate because the total taxation we take is 20% of our 2018 revenue, which is lower than you would see in other parts of the province due to the Peace River Agreement funding, formerly Fair Share, which is quite nice because we're able to provide a fair amount of service and living and infrastructure without having to be taxing to the same amounts if we were in different areas. Municipal taxes are the majority of our funding, 20%. Peace River Agreement comes in at a very close second at 17%. Those are two significant pieces of funding. I'm going to go into more detail on both of those areas in future slides. The next area that is, other. Other can be very vague and kind of encompasses everything. One thing that has been a goal is to leverage other organizations and government agencies to help fund services that the city provides that are used by more than the city residents and are further reaching than just people in town. And this is a new shift, and a shift towards spreading that cost beyond the borders of our city and town. And I think it is a very good direction, and I really hope we can continue to work on this into the future. The $10 million of other does include a significant amount of capital grants that are strictly identified for, can you hear me now? For capital projects. So 3.5 million of the 10 million is earmarked for the runway extension project. Fees and charges, this amount includes any piece of money that the city collects for a fee or a charge. This does include sewer and water charges, and it includes airport landing fees. If you go to the skating rink, fees of that. What is the other important one? Land development and waste collection. For a local government to charge a fee, there has to be an expense related to it. So fees are very expense oriented. You have to have some sort of tangible expense to be able to charge a fee for it. You can't charge a fee just to charge a fee, unlike a tax where it can be used anywhere. The collections for other governments, that is not controlled by the city. The city has to collect on behalf of these people, and then the city pays the other governments for that amount, such as the school district tells us how much we got to pay, so we collect it on our tax bill and write them a check once collection has been made. So for 2018, we're due to find or create or levy $66 million in revenue. This is a significant amount of money, and the decisions of what we do with it are not taken lightly. Items that we carried forward from last year are the capital reserve of 13 million, and that consists of projects that are still being completed into 2018 and our unallocated capital savings that can be used for future projects. The same can be said for the operating reserve, and then the restricted reserves are for specific items. That brings the total available funding for 2018 to $87 million. So, speaking to property taxes, which people typically care about very much because it affects them once a year, the city's been faced with a second year of declining assessments. The property values are going down, and this has not, we haven't seen declining property values. I look back to the records, the quick records I found at 2002. Every year, property values have increased since that date. So it is more unique of a situation than we're used to. It is definitely makes it more difficult to plan, because you now have to change your tax rates to collect similar amounts of money. So a residential property that paid tax last year, to compare to this year, the value fell overall by about 5.5%. In the commercial sector, it was 1.8%, so a bit smaller of a hit. These declines in the assessment will be counteracted slightly by new construction that occurred. But the new construction is something you can't rely on year after year, because what happens in the year people don't build something? So this year we did a shift in the theoretical basis of how we determine how much tax to levy. What it has resulted in is the first year in 6 years that the tax rate has changed. So it has been quite a debated topic, and council has had to wrestle with taking the responsibility of it, because truthfully they are the ones that bear the brunt of that the burden. The goal is council authorized a 0% tax change. So if you paid $1,000 in property taxes last year and your property fell by the normal change in value, you should pay $1,000 again this year. If your property changes beyond the norm, higher or lower, your property tax bill will be affected one way or the other. We cannot set a tax rate for every individual in town. We have to work over the whole entire, every household. There's the 4,700 odd homes in town to determine a reasonable method of levying tax and trying to keep it fair and sustainable. So one of the key pieces of all that is, you can find on the brochure on the back, is even though there is a tax rate increase, 25% of all residents will actually see a decrease in their property tax bill due to the change in assessments. 34% of residents will see a change between 1 penny and $100, which, that is, their homes didn't change by the exact average. And 23% of residents will see a change between $100 and $200. So we bring that all together, then over 80% of our population of homeowners will see a change in taxes of less than $200 or a decrease. That is an incredible achievement, I think, and it keeps your taxes stable year to year, and you can plan for that. You know you're not going to see a huge change in a single year. With commercial properties, they were very similar. 34% will see a decrease, 14% will see no change at all, and 32% will see an increase of less than 100. So across our commercial class of properties, 80% are seeing a change of less than 100. The pamphlet is actually more up to date than that one. So the Peace River Agreement is the other big piece of funding we have. In the last 2 years, we've seen more volatility in this number because the total allotment of funding for the Northeast has been limited to or capped at $50 million. And so in prior years, that total available funding was always growing by a bit. So if you saw a decline in your allotment due to your population, it would be typically offset by an increase due to the whole entire pot being increased. So that being said, last year there was a less than favorable change to our allotment. This year in 2018, we've been fortunate and had a favorable change. There's $15 million coming from Peace River Agreement, and one of the main drivers for the calculation of this amount is population. Fort St. John did not see the population change versus Dawson Creek, which had a more positive population change, which helped bring in more money, which makes sense because now we have more people to care for. This agreement's good. The total pot of money will be increasing, I believe, in 2020, and is scheduled to increase over the next several years of that. So after we collected all the money, what are we going to spend it on? So one of the key things to look at is not the big yellow number at the bottom that says total expenditures and reserves of $87 million. We want to look at the operating expenses. Those are the things that are here year after year after year and are the core of what the city does. There's a mandate from council that they didn't want to see expanded services, and they didn't have a desire to retract services because we're able to afford our current level of services we're providing. One of the biggest areas is the recreation and cultural services, making up 21% of the budget, and a close second is protective services, which is made up of your fire department and your police. Going down the line, you can see transportation, that's public works, where you care for all of your roads. And then we get to the general administrative, that's us in here, keeping everything going. And the one that is surprising is debt servicing. 10% of the total operating expenses are allocated to paying down our debt, which we should see if we continue on not taking out any more debt. That number decreased each year. And that's almost like investing in ourselves. That money gets freed up and gets to be spent in other areas, which will reduce the effect of inflationary pressures all across all the other expenses. So bringing light to the capital plan for this year, we have $12 million, $13 million scheduled, and we're completing $11 million from the prior year. So you can see the total expenditures, meaning money flowing out the front door, is budgeted to be $74 million. The pinkish line there, reserves for carry forward, that's the amount that we've budgeted to save for future years. That includes saving up for different capital projects. That includes earnings that are saved in the sewer and water funds. Now this amount, it can fluctuate, but that's the goal. So bringing our operations to the top 3 service areas I mentioned, but the function areas is a interesting way of looking at expenses overall. So a service area can be considered like a department where you have a group of people and expenses achieving a goal, such as the fire department. Now the function areas is, the wages. We can look at the total wages for the city. It will be $14.8 million. One good news story about this one is the wage costs have been typically always increasing. This year there was much work done around how we can gain some of those, what was that term? There's efficiencies the organizational capacity to help slow that growth? How do we utilize people better? Can we be using technology versus hiring another person to do something? These are all things that work into, controlling our wage costs. Contracts come in at a close second at $11 million. That one can be seen very easily when we get a big snowfall. That's where, the contractors get hired to clean that up. And finally, materials and goods and supplies makes a relatively small function area compared to the other two, but that's all the stuff we purchase and gets used up on a daily basis to run the city. Bringing it to capital investment. Water and sewer, 1.2 million. One of the key pieces here is the filtration system that is being, Kevin will speak to this one later better. This is not so much my area. But I want to bring attention to the land and improvements of 5.1 million. That is where the runway extension is being included. It's not the most clear definition, I feel, in it. You can see another 3.6 million in roads and sidewalks, and that's a number that people like. Smoothing out roads, and when I drove to work today, I think that number is good, and there's always room for improvement on that one. Now this is one that the debt servicing, like I've spoken about a bit, but it's a key piece that the city has control over, but also there isn't very much control, because once you're into that contract for debt, that's it. Proposed debt for 2018, good news story, zero. It was very clear from council that there is no appetite to take on any debt. I commend them on that, and that's very good, because they identified that, it's really good to buy things, but you got to start paying for things eventually too, or you're going to run out of money by paying interest. Going to the next slide, we have a projection of where we'll be in a number of years. And we had a height of debt in 2015 of over 36 million. And there is a good appetite and a good plan to get these numbers down. This will free up future funding and will reduce stresses caused by inflationary measures, which in turn turns into taxation not having to be changed or increased at such a rate. It's a method of lowering the burden to all the residents and hopefully providing the same level of services. So, that is our plan for 2018. A few big pieces here, a significant shift in the methodology of the tax rate. We're faced by falling assessments, which is something that hasn't been seen in over a decade. It's not an easy choice by council to have to see that and know that everybody focuses so much on the tax rate, and they say the tax rate's going up, and it's like, well, tax rate is going up because assessments are going down, and taxation is based on those two pieces, tax rate and assessment, and that gets us to where we are. Thank you. Any of you have any questions?
We'll let the mayor, if the mayor wants to add anything.
Thanks, Adam. So here's the detail in terms of a whole bunch of work that's been ongoing over the last 3 months. I think Adam's highlighted a couple of components to it. The overall assessment for residential, commercial dropping. The direction was we're going to find a way to keep the amount of spend flat, buffer some of the inflationary pressures with some of that new assessment that brought in about $400,000 in new revenue to us. Capital this year is modest. The capital program, we've got some paving, 10th Street, 15th Street. We've got some sidewalk stuff we're going to do. Big ticket item that council have been really dealing with is the airport runway extension, add 1,000 feet of runway to the east end of the runway. It's anticipated, estimated discussion at about $5 million, 5.1. We're going to do some of the engineering, try to lock in costs, and then there's a bunch of different grants available within there, and once we get all of that business case put together for that capital project later this year, then council will make the final decision on that. So it's included in the budget for the analysis and the business case, and council will make the final determination once we understand costs and where the money's coming from. Then that'll be finalized. One of the ones that wasn't spoken to is curbside recycling. Was one of the largest pieces of feedback we got from the community through our OCP discussions last year and over the years. We are looking at curbside recycling as a service for the community for provision of curbside recycling every second week, bi-weekly. It's anticipated it's going to be about a $7 or $8 per month additional cost for that service. We're going to do the scope of work and put it out to an RFP, and that'll come back within the next few months in terms of that decision, in terms of whether we'll move forward with that. And then we got some other capital things within there. We carved probably close to $1 million out of the spend in terms of trying to keep that overall dollar flat from last year to this year. The good news on Peace River Agreement, we lost, as Adam mentioned, last year because of the population, which is it's a huge piece of the formula that determines how that overall pot of money in the Peace River Agreement gets carved out between all of the municipalities. And the population estimates are set by BC Stats. The Canada Census in 2016 reset the benchmark, and as a result of that, for us this year, we've gained $1 million back into Peace River Agreement funding for the city, which has been very beneficial for us to be able to put that back into our overall budget. We got about $4.5 million to $5 million set aside in reserves, unallocated reserve fund, to build for future projects, future capital projects for the city, and we got a number of them in front of us. The fire hall is one, Public Works is another one. We got a bunch of capital projects in the future, and so started to build that nest egg, that reserve fund, that pot of money, so that you got cash in the bank to do it versus borrowing or other sources to do it, which I think is very positive for us to be able to start to see that capital, unallocated capital reserve fund built. And as I say, we got $4.5 or $5 million allocated for there. So that's kind of the highlights of the budget, and obviously whenever anybody sees the mill rates going up, and you see that rate per thousand, that's a worry, because that's what people see. But as Adam demonstrated in the explanation, the loss in overall assessment in values, the amount of money we're going to collect is going to be flat. It's just some people will be affected differently depending on how your individual assessment was determined for yourself in 2017. So Duncan, I want to give it over to you. And
yeah, and just through your worship, really emphasizing the revenue versus the expenditure, and we're looking at some reviews of our water rates, and we've looked at our fees and charges and where those revenues are at. Council's directed us not to expand services or increase services, and further this year Council's directed that we look at the operational side of the organization and some service prioritization and complete that service capacity review and look at those efficiencies in trying to strike that balance between revenue and expenditure and that burden on the community as well. So a lot of work has gone into this budget from staff and senior management and council, and a lot of information, and I think it's a really strong document that we have in front of the public today.
so this is a opportunity at a public consultation, and we got Stu and Lloyd in the audience and Robin, and I'd really like to, before I give it to council for comments, I'd like to open it up to our public and ask for any comments that you guys may have. Robin, go ahead.
The only concern that I have, two concerns, one is not about the way that don't let the community take off. But the other one, the question I really have,
Their microphone.
the other question I have.
Can we get, Kevin's got it. We'll get Robin, sorry, we've got somebody on the.
Okay, well, the real important question though is why aren't the paramedics under the city protective services? Like, those are also an important part of the community. I'm a better customer than most of you here, unfortunately, but that's where that's, so the paramedics should be looking at that too. Like, there is a communication problem there.
Yeah, so, sorry, so the issue of paramedics?
In the budget, it was, the fire department and the police service were listed under the protective services. However, the paramedic system or the paramedic services were not listed. And that's why I'd like to know why they're not listed.
So the paramedics are a provincial funded organization through medical services through the Ministry of Health. So they have we have no jurisdiction within the paramedics in terms of funding or their operations or dispatch or control. The fire department is entirely funded by the city of Dawson Creek and the rural areas that are within the fire protection area. And the RCMP are funded by the provincial and federal governments in partnership with the city, depending on the size of your population. So if your population is more than 5,000 people to 15,000 people, you pay 70% of the cost of the police. And if you're under 5,000, you don't pay anything. And if you're above 5,000, you pay 90% of the cost of the policing. And that policing complement is driven by the provincial government, the federal government, in terms of the amount of files and the amount of work and the service area and highway patrol. But so we have a piece of that responsibility for public safety, but the paramedics have no accountability and no responsibility through to the city of Dawson Creek, and we don't fund them at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Stu? Yeah. Can get the mic just so we've got somebody on the phone, Stu, and for the media. So I need you to speak into the mic.
Oh, I get to talk to Lydia. Actually, you guys in there need to increase the volume of your speakers because out here we can't hear you very well. However, I have a question for Councillor McFadden.
Uh-oh.
And this is the question, and I don't quite understand this. You're talking about spending $5.1 million on the extension of the runway. All right, so we agree to do that. If you extend the runway this 1,000 feet, I'm assuming that's the right distance, 1,000 feet. If you do that, are we guaranteed that Air Canada, WestJet are going to land in here on a regular schedule, or is this one of these stories like Kevin Costner says, if you build it, they will come? I'd kind of like to know that because I really find it a stretch to spend $5 million on something that if they don't come, why would we do that? Thank you.
No, there's no guarantees to, except for taxes. But right now in the airline industry, the flavor of the day is these Q400. I guess they're large. They seat about 50 people, but even now they're being phased out. And going forward, they anticipate they'll be back to using smaller, quieter, more fuel-efficient jets. And that being the case, there'd be nobody would land here on 5,000 feet. Central Mountain flies Beechcraft 1900s that could very well be Second World War vintage. And they've got a few Dash 8s, that's what I meant. The Q400s are just an enhanced version of Dash 8. But they're being phased out over the next few years, and the thinking is they'll be going back to smaller and more efficient jets that'll hold 75, 80 people. And they will not land on 5,000 feet. Now, people always say to me, well, they used to land 737s and 727s here. And they did. But that was the day they were flying 727-200 series. Now they're flying 737, probably 800 series, and they're much more bigger. Now, could they land? Yes, but the insurance carriers for the airlines say if you land anywhere 5,000 feet or under, you have no insurance. But if one were flying overhead and get into trouble and had to make an emergency, could they come in here? Yes, they could.
Stu, I want to clarify one thing as well. The 5.1 is the total budget anticipated right now. But we all already know that there are grants available up to 2/3 of the proposed budget, or the proposed capital project. So that would put it down to the 1.5 to 1.7. So we will put all of that together, and then once that entire package of engineering, costing, and revenue sources of grants and other funding, that's when council will make the final determination. It's in the budget for discussion and for the deliberation of building the business case, but it hasn't been approved that we're going to do it until we get all that information.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, and Stu, just one other piece. Council deliberated possibly borrowing for that project, the 1.7, although it's 5.1 because it's contingent on a grant. We can include that as revenue within our overall budget, so 3.3 or whatever that number is considered revenue already. So really the expenditure is 1.7, which council chose to restrict some funding that was available in our savings. So instead of borrowing, they've restricted some funding that was in essentially a surplus or a savings account. So council hasn't borrowed for that project. And if at any point council decides that the grants aren't there, that they don't want to pursue it, that money has not been spent.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stu. Any other questions? Lloyd, you got anything? Lloyd's behind you, Stu.
I want to bring attention to.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much. I'm just going to follow up from the gentleman in front of me regarding the extension for the Dawson Creek airstrip. First off, to correct your councillor to your left, a Q400 holds 74 passengers, not 50. And they are a pretty economical airplane. They are the leading edge of propeller-driven airplane in that capacity. And I don't know, although I'm not an expert, that they're on their way out in light of further pure jet airplanes coming. Anyway, my background is I spent about 20 years in the airline industry. I worked at Dawson Creek Airport for a considerable number of years, and Mayor Bumstead and I caught that plane weekly for many years to make sure we supported Dawson Creek Airport, which has always been an issue. People in Dawson Creek have not supported this airport. They've used many excuses to try to justify going to Fort St. John, such as they had fire trucks, they had an air traffic control tower. What they actually had was CPA, frequent flyer points. So that's that's some history you need to know. But to the budget. I presume the $5.1 million is not just a 1,000-foot extension, but it is a resurfacing and repaving, so the proposed 6,000 airstrip would be renewed. That's question number one. And I know you don't have any contracts with Jazz or with WestJet's, what is it, Encore, or Swoop, which is a new WestJet airline. But I do remember not too many years ago when Mayor Luckstrom was here, that you offered WestJet a very, very, very attractive deal to operate in and out of Dawson Creek Airport, and he turned you down. So, the question, is the 5.1 for an entire refurbish of the airstrip with an additional 1,000, or is it just the 1,000 feet?
So go ahead, Duncan.
Sorry, so through your worship, the 5.1 has some contingency built into it. for project costs or unforeseen costs. However, it is for the extension. It includes lighting, it includes paving, it includes base work, sub-base, engineering, all aspects of that 1,000-foot extension. And I believe the contingency, Patrick, is 30%, maybe 40% on that?
40%.
Pardon me?
40%.
40% on that 5.1.
It doesn't include the refurbishment, the repaving of the entire 5,000 feet of the existing runway.
Well, if I may,
Yep.
I think this needs to be rethought. We're fortunate to have a good airstrip in Dawson Creek. It's 5,000 feet long. Air ambulances can get in and out of here, et cetera, et cetera. And if there was an emergency, a larger airplane could get in, but Fort St. John's just up the road, and if you're coming downhill, it makes no difference if you're going to Fort St. John or you're going to try to land in Dawson Creek. So I think what we need to do is make sure that the existing airstrip, which hasn't had much work done on it over the last number of years, make sure it is upgraded, just the pavement, to make sure that that airstrip is going to last for another 20, 25 years. If we spend $5.1 million for another 1,000 feet, now we got a 6,000 foot airstrip with 5,000 that might be unusable in a few years from now. That's my concern.
So Lloyd, we absolutely will be doing the entire business case for the project, including the extension as well as looking at the existing. And I want to clarify that the extension of adding 1,000 feet isn't in any way aimed at saying, well, if we do this, we're going to get Air Canada or WestJet or anybody else in here. It's about enhancing the abilities of the airport to accommodate more flights that we're missing today, both in the charter business and other aspects to it. And so that'll be part of it, but I want to clarify, we're saying we got 2/3 of that funding coming from grants, so we're not spending $5.1 million of the city's money to do this project. And I think that was, I can speak on behalf of council, that the majority of those who supported the initiative are that we do the business case, we understand where the revenue is coming from and what is that expenditure that's coming from the city of Dawson Creek, either from reserves or wherever. But that whole piece of it will be part of the entire process we go through before the final decision is made. Duncan, you look like one
And
of that.
just to build off that a little bit, we have completed a condition assessment of the existing runway. It is slated for resurface in the near future. It is an ACAP eligible project, 100% funding, which we hope to apply for, and we hope logistically that we can mesh those two projects together in order to just keep that efficiency and the logistics of the airport operating.
I wouldn't hope to apply, I would apply.
Well, we are, yeah.
Thanks, Lloyd. Anything else, anybody?
No one's asking.
Yeah, go, no, that's what we're here, Stu. We'd rather be sitting here listening and engaging than out in the sunshine, I'll tell you that.
Thank you. Well, actually, the sunshine's pretty nice, so be careful. I have a question. I heard somewhere in there that you're talking and thinking about putting out other recycling containers.
No, so we're gonna put out an RFP to offer curbside recycling at the curbside to the resident.
Okay. I guess I've got about two questions for you. First of all, how much is that going to cost the city? Not just me, the city.
It's that'll be a service that'll be provided like your waste collection, like your garbage collection. You'll pay for, the resident will pay for that. We're anticipating it'll be about $7 or $8 per month for a bi-weekly collection of recycling at the curbside.
Okay, the next question is, I don't understand why you're doing it. What's wrong with people? Can't they get off their butts and take it down to the recycle place? Because you know what? I'm not very familiar with this stuff, but the way I understand it, I understand Fort St. John have it, and they're not really very damn happy with it, because you have to sit and pick out all this stuff. You don't just dump all your recycles into this particular box. You have to put special stuff into the box. Now, I could be need to be corrected if I'm wrong.
No, it's a single stream, paper, cardboards, plastic, fibers. Stu, it was the biggest issue we heard from residents all through our official community planning who wanted curbside recycling.
Really?
Number one by far.
Really? Then why don't they get out and drive on some of your streets and fall into some of them holes?
Yeah, I guess that's their drive, right? And we're going to fix some of those holes on 13th Street and 15th Street and 10th Street this year.
Oh, there's lots.
I have one more question regarding.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stu.
I have one more question.
Yeah,
regarding-
just get the microphone down to you, Robin.
Since matter of streets came up, is there any way they can retime the traffic lights so that people like me can get across the intersections? The ones at the intersection at the mall on 12th Street runs for 10 minutes or 10 seconds unless somebody hits the pad. Then you have 2 seconds to across the freeway.
Duncan?
So through your worship, with Kevin, I think we can maybe talk to the ministry about that. Their highways, the traffic lights on 8th and Alaska are the responsibility of the Ministry of Transportation, but we can work with them to see if they can extend that.
Mr. Burnley says it's the city's responsibility.
And anything on 8th Street or Alaska, Kevin, correct me? Yeah, anything on 8th Street or
Okay.
Alaska is the responsibility of the Ministry of Transportation. If it's outside of those two highways, then they're our responsibility.
Kevin is meeting with the Ministry of Highways. I don't know if you've had that meeting or coming up, Kevin, but we'll absolutely raise it and see if we can find a way to extend that timing for the pedestrian.
Okay, thank you.
Shaylee?
Just to perhaps Mr. Gibson, I can compile a list of areas that he's noticed where that timing isn't long enough for people with accessibility issues, and then we can get it to Kevin. So if he's going to talk, let's make a list of all the areas that you've noticed, and then Kevin has a compiled list of the areas that you find are not giving you enough time to cross the street.
Perfect.
Okay,
thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming today and giving us some feedback and input. Adam?
Before we finish up, I'd like to draw public's attention to our website where it has more detail on the budget so you can get really into what each line means. So you can Google search City of Dawson Creek, and this is what you'll get. This is the first screen. On the left-hand side, you'll see the quick links and the budget. And we can click there. And it'll bring us to this wonderful page which shows our stewardship statement. And under the 2018 budget, there are two nice blue buttons you can press. The online property tax calculator. So what you can do is you can go in there, put in your assessment value, and it'll pop out your estimated property taxes. This isn't a for sure number, this is a reasonable estimation. And so let's put in $250,000 under the assessment. Scroll down a little bit. And that'll give you your estimated property taxes for 2018. Now if we back up to the screen we were at before, this is the exciting one, the 2018 draft budget. Give it a click, and you go into here, and if you scroll down, you can look at either the expenditures, we can go into there and see it, and it gives you 2018's draft budget, the 2017 budget, and the 2016 budget. Now, you could go into recreational services, and it will give you what makes up all those pieces. So you can go further and further into detail and really see where the city's spending the money. This is something that wasn't achievable using paper and the old methods. So tell your friends, tell everybody to take a look at it and see what they think. Some people might really like this, some people might be bored to death, but it is a way to let people understand and to see it. And so when you're clicking around in here, you can search by different types. So you could go look at the revenue section, you can look at the graph in different ways, or if you really like the numbers, you can click the summary tab, and it just gives you numbers. Now, I like the graphs better personally, but that's me. That's my spiel. It's online, go check it out.
You gotta be able to turn the damn computer on. I don't know how to do that. I have one more question, if I may. I think it was Duncan that was talking about the trying to get, trying to make the cost of the operating of our facilities, and I'll use the curling rink, the skating rink, the Encana Center, the swimming pool, those kinds of things. Now, and I understand the cost of operating this stuff. I really truly do, and I'm sure as hell glad I'm not in your spot. But you know, sometimes, and I'll use myself as an example because I'm not really Scotch, but I'm a little bit tight. When I go to a supper somewhere or a party or something, the first thing I look at is the price. And if the price is $50 or $60 for me, plus the same for my wife, you know what? It gets a niche and we get to watch a shitty TV story. But if the show is $25 for myself and 25 for my, we just go. Now there's a message there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stu. Anything further, council? Everybody, thanks for coming out today. We appreciate it. Obviously, it's a big bit of work that these guys do, and thank you to staff, administration, and everybody for coming out today. Robin and Stu and Lloyd, thank you. Have a great, see you, Cheryl. Have a sunny afternoon, everybody.
Bye,